Hello, world, and welcome back to another episode of Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. My name is Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle. And today we are perhaps the least prepared, but actually maybe the most prepared to speak on the topic of higher states of consciousness, part 2, which is episode 12 of John Vervaeke's series. So I'm going to pass it over to Lizelle to get us started with a quote, as she usually does.
Hello, world. I hope you don't mind. I'm bringing in my own reorientation. So this is recommended by John in After Socrates. I'm trying to reorientate myself with Neoplatism, as I said. And this month is the month of Epicurus. So I'm going to read a couple of his maxims to start us with. I think it's just good to just sink into the moment and to reflect a little bit and get our philosophy on. One must laugh and seek wisdom and attend to one's home life and use one's other goods and always recount the pronouncements of true philosophy. Do not pretend to practice wisdom, but practice wisdom in reality. We need not the appearance of health, but true health. It is foolish to ask the gods that which we can supply for ourselves. Whoever has peace of mind disturbs neither self nor others. Insofar as you forget nature, you will find yourself in trouble and create for yourself endless fears and desires. A philosopher's words are empty if they do not heal the suffering of humankind. For just as medicine is useless if it does not remove sickness from the body, so philosophy is useless if it does not remove suffering from the soul. Love for true philosophy destroys every disturbing and troublesome desire. Unhappiness is caused by fears or by endless and empty desires. But he who is able to rein these in, create for himself a blissful understanding. Meditate on these and kindred precepts day and night, by yourself and with a like-minded friend, and you will never be disturbed, whether waking or sleeping, but will live as a god amongst people. For people lose all appearance of mortality by living in the midst of immortal blessings.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's just the first degree of wisdom.
Right. That's just a white belt.
Yeah.
That's so nice, because that's kind of what John's doing with this episode is why are we even talking about this? You know, if people achieve a state in a higher state of consciousness, if they get insights that they feel to be real, how is that relevant to me, first of all? And why should I even listen to these people? Because they are clearly out of their mind when things happen. But it's a state of inner peace that we're striving towards. And in order to experience that inner peace, there's, states that you can visit that give you an insight that is a pattern that you could possibly apply on the rest of your life.
Oh, that's a very good connection. Thank you for making it.
Yeah.
It's like radical self-transformation, self-transcendence.
Inner peace.
Yeah. Enhanced inner peace and connectedness to reality. Yeah, that's what he says. That's what we're after.
Yeah.
And indeed, it does reflect in what I just read.
Yeah. And so this is how the episode starts. And we, before, when we were preparing for this, mentioned that the reason is when we can no longer legitimate with words, when we can no longer articulate when it's ineffable, the experience, in terms of this two worlds mythology. So that two world mythology of, I guess, the mystical imaginal space and then this physical reality.
Well, the two-world mythology actually made it effable. I don't know if that's a word, but the two-world mythology gave people words to speak about it, because the two-world mythology meant, okay, this is the natural world, and then there's the supernatural world, the world of gods. But we no longer believe in a heaven and earth. I know Jonathan Peugeot has ways of making that plausible, but in general, we have to move into this imaginal space to experience heaven and hell, or heaven and earth. But in general, we don't have that. We just have this one world.
Mm-hmm.
We only have this one reality, the natural, the physicality, that is why it became ineffable, because it's easy to say, oh, I've been enthusiastic, means a god has taken possession of me. That's an easy thing to say, and to put in words.
Mm-hmm.
But if we no longer believe in the existence of these gods, what the fuck just happened to us? That's why it's become ineffable. Exactly. Actually.
Yeah. Wow, that's nice. Yeah. It's so interesting because it makes sense for people to have an experience when they're in a drug-induced state. Like, oh, well, yeah, of course, because there was a drug there. But when it happens spontaneously, or from things like sleep deprivation and, fasting and things like that, when it happens that way, it's, now we're starting to be able to explain that with science, measuring science. And that's the lingo, that's the lingua franca. That's what we want to speak to one another, is science, because it's rational. It makes rational sense. I've used more than one sense to compile that data, which we'll get further into. But here at the beginning, we're talking about this because that inner state of peace is achieved when you make sense of yourself through identifying with your environment. So your sense of identity. He says conformity is achieving a sense of identity at one with the one.
That sounds very Neoplatonic.
The lenses through which you hear.
At one with the one. I mean, really, everyone must hear Neoplatonism, and that can't just be my ears. Maybe it is, but yeah. I have the words oneness, anagoge, joy, deep remembrance of your true and authentic self. And then I do want to, because the reason why we're ill prepared is because we had so much to talk about. But I do want to mention that you mentioned here when we were preparing humanness, being a human with another human being.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually, we think it, we take it for granted. Oh, we know what it is to be human, but we've lost it.
Yeah.
And a deep, even on that level, a deep remembrance of being human. That is powerful.
Yeah. There's so many reasons why, but one of the first ones pops into my head is that we're so fascinated with AI because we interact with it so much. We interact with machines so much. So we're trying to understand ourselves through them. And therefore, again, we're becoming cyborgs. That just keeps coming up for me, is that our resistance, allergy, our, decision to not be around other humans is affecting us in this way, where we no longer know what human means. Okay, and so then this leads me into him reviewing the continuity hypothesis and flow, and like thinking of this idea of that's what humans have this specialized ability to do. It says, but the expertise that is flowing is domain general skill for how to optimally grip the world. That's so interesting to think that we have this domain general, so not a specific skill, like not, I do this one thing and I'm niched to do this one thing, but I have this domain general skill for how to optimally group my surroundings so that I'm adaptable, so that, or my genetics will understand, okay, what do I need to do here?
Yeah. Maybe it's in a sense related to general intelligence, which he speaks about later when he speaks about the prefrontal lobe or cortex and the ones that I can't pronounce, parietal.
Yeah.
And then he goes into how disruptive strategies from them. So we're using this domain general skill of getting an optimal grip on the world. But then what the disruptive strategies do, it momentarily, completely disrupts. You lose your grip on reality. At least that's my experience. You completely lose your grip on reality for a moment, or for an extended period, depending how long the ritual is.
Yeah. Depends on how long the ritual is.
And and that makes so much sense to me now. Like we were talking about, like then you have to start groping around in the darkness to feel for, okay, what is stable, what is real, what can I rely on? Because your general just like, oh yeah, I can walk on this carpet, just was gone, and now you have to find something new. You have to retrain your general skill of getting an optimal grip of the world, almost reorientate that completely yourself. And this is so powerful.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I want to describe a little bit here the analogy that is going to keep coming back up for me, which is the cave diving. And we've mentioned it before too, how this feels like John's providing a tether to like you hook yourself to the tether, and that way you can go off and you have this little lead, but it allows you to go off free. And there was this video that I saw of a very aggressive instructor, not nearly like John is, where you can just go off and float around, but this instructor for like a rescue certification course, a rescue diver. So a rescue diver needs to be able to react to anything that happens. Somebody gets caught up in their cord, somebody's tank starts falling. So the instructor has 3 divers together that are trying to cert, and he's disrupting them in ways where he's like throwing one of their goggles off, the other one he's loosening the strap on their tank so that it falls. Somebody else, he's removing their weights and throwing them down so that they're buoyant and start floating up, and just like chaos. It's chaos.
Anytime which is really dangerous.
Yes.
Actually just floating up.
It is, because you can get the bends, and so you have to be able to, get yourself back regulated despite the chaos, and kind of help each other out in different ways, and that's, that whole disorientation though, when you come together as, okay, this person doesn't have goggles, she can't see. What do I need to do for her in order for her to help me? I'm going to guide her hand to her BCD or her spare, and then put that in my mouth. Okay. And then we can solve the goggles problem. But she also has to trust me that I'm, there for her to get her goggles back too. You're here with me. My hand being on her tells her I'm in trouble too, fix my problem, and then I can fix yours, or whatever. It's just so interesting how in that your community coming together, you can put the senses together.
Yeah. Which brings us, I think, to maybe not even like a few points ahead, but I think it's a perfect time to talk about it here. The danger of being autodidactic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because we use the analogy here of diving without a certification, and how dangerous, like that's foolish,
and without a body. Diving without a body, and especially cave diving, because I think playing with the sacred is as dangerous and as thrilling and
foolish.
as cave diving. It's cave diving.
Yes.
It's not just normal diving. It's not like you uncertified divers like, oh, I'm just gonna go swim in the shallow waters and this see-through clear, like a lot of the islands you can easily, I think maybe you won't drown. But cave diving, uncertified, without a body,
death wish. Yeah.
And
and it's not even trivial analogy, because your mind is so powerful that exploring the depths, exploring the shadows, the crypts by yourself can get you locked into something that makes you a monster or makes people around you monsters. Even worse, right? If everybody around you is a monster. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to. It's like we said before. It seems so obvious to people. Don't go cave diving if you're not experienced, and don't go on your own. But still, people think they can play with this on their own, and without teaching and guidance. Which I also have to mention when you were, because we didn't actually speak of this, but when you referred back to, we talked of John as being the rope that we're. I was like, oh my God, we've moved quite deep into this cave.
Yeah, there's no light
unintentionally.
Yeah. There's no way out now except through. Yeah, well, and
thank God for that rope.
Thank God for that rope. Seriously, like it gets really unnerving still sometimes, though, because, well, one of the things that he says here is it's a systematic change in your consciousness when you wake up. And so that's why, like, it's just so important to have a community around this or have some sort of guidance in this, because that's the one thing that my scuba certification and any certification I've ever gotten has given me, is an experience, maybe just one experience, where now I know what to do in a crisis. I haven't lived through the crisis, but I've been trained to do trained to do something in the crisis. And it could be as simple as, like I told you earlier, instead of asking everybody if they're ready, you ask anybody not ready when you're about to lift somebody, because it gets yeah, I'm not ready. Very clear, I'm not ready. But nobody knows when they're ready. So it's like simple little frame shifts like that can help to get, out of the echo chamber, out of your own personal way of thinking. So it's a systematic change in consciousness. You don't just flip one thing and okay, that's the simple switch that's been flipped. No, now your whole brain works differently and you're like disoriented. What do I do here? So very foolish to go in with a cave without a cert and without a buddy.
Yeah, I was thinking now, but this is very unformed still. When you were talking about you haven't actually lived through the crisis, but you've been trained and practiced, like how to do what to do and that maybe that's what ritual is as well.
Ooh, yeah.
Like it's not the actual interaction or whatever, but it's practicing theater, how to act in these situations. If yeah.
Oh, I think you're onto something. Yeah. No, I think that's helping us to be in relationship with the thing that we can't explain, that which is ineffable.
The ineffable.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a need to know how to interact, because I mean, my grandpa will say stuff like, I'm just talking to myself, don't worry. It's like, no, you're not. But you don't know that because you weren't trained on how to interact with that. I mean, for him, it's like dementia, but there could be something else in there. Like if he knew how to
the
navigate.
imaginal space.
Yeah.
The inexhaustible ground of being. Seeing this John Vervaeke that we're working on. Yeah. It's the collective. Because if you go deep in ritual, I believe you go deep in the unconscious. And if you go deep in the unconscious, you end up in the collective unconscious.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's so interesting that you describe it that way, because it's like that experience that we had. Yeah, we went so deep into the collective consciousness because we like a whole series of events led to this complete decentering, to the point where it's now like there isn't even really an entity to embody here. This is just a channel. This is just allowing any expression to flow through. Yeah. Decentering alleviates But pursuing as an autodidactic, you should consider how egocentric you are approaching radical transformation. I love that because it's scathing to like, how could, like, no, you're just not going to be able to face that alone. Don't even try that alone. How foolish would it be to go scuba diving without a cert, or cave diving without a cert and without a buddy? It's just like, think about it in that context. Think about it that way, because you could get yourself into a mental catastrophe if you try to go at this autodidactically. So decentering alleviates that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Removing yourself from the center, I wrote. Decentering. That's how I understand it.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be the center of reality.
Oh, God, no. It seems so much more tragic when that's the case. Few comedic moments in the whole tragedy.
If you do think you want to be the center of reality, then clearly you have not experienced reality to
That's right.
in any extent.
Yeah.
Close to its fullness.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because there was some part in that you read, I think, when you forget about nature. I don't know. Yeah, that part really had me thinking about this idea of like decentering and or being the center of your universe because you've eliminated the universe around you or the nature around you. It's like your problems are just so much bigger when you don't reflect on everything that's going on in the bigger picture.
The isolated individual, he uses the words isolated individual, and there's nothing lonelier and scarier than being the isolated individual.
Yeah.
And it brings me back again to that ontocentrism, not allocentrism even, but ontocentrism. I mean, nature. Wow.
Yeah.
And the oneness indeed of it all. It's fucking powerful.
Yeah, and this is like really highlighting the emphasis on community and the Sangha, and like more moving into what that all represents as the glue. So first he's talking about how it is unwise to do psychedelics outside of a community that fosters the wisdom you need in conjunction with it. So this is like even more like, so many people try psychedelics this autodidactic way, if I can use that word there, but in this way where it's just about a trip, just about let's go for a ride and let's go to a festival and take something, so that this is even more profound. And it's like, probably would have been just as profound if you had just integrated into the community in a way that wasn't chemically induced. You can do that just by associating with other people in the group, whatever. But he's like really emphasizing this experiential learning, these higher states of consciousness having a necessity for some sort of community, the Sangha, or the psychedelic community, which is now flourishing. But participatory knowing, participatory change.
Well, first he mentions that we have the institutions for information, we have the institutions of knowledge. We do not have this for wisdom, and that's what After Socrates is all about. I think it was one of his ads. This was very prominent. So
not just cognition, not just a change in consciousness, but also in the self. That's what the participatory change is about.
It alters the machinery of the self, which is why you don't want to do this like recklessly on your own.
I'm just like imagining robot like R2D2 or something trying to fool with his own bolts and nuts or something. It's like, I don't know, it might not work after you're done. Or when like I tried to fix the cigarette lighter in my car so that I could charge my phone with it. It still doesn't work to this day because I didn't know what I was doing, and I completely just trashed my radio, so now I can't change the time, the power button doesn't work. Like I just fucked with a lot of other stuff because I tried to fix that thing, not knowing.
Yeah.
So
That's a very good analogy. You just fuck up a lot of
yes.
other stuff.
I do love my car, but this is the whole thing about like not loving my car enough to know it so well that I knew how to fix that, like reading a manual maybe. But this idea of the coupling is the coupling. I said in profound.
Know thy car. I just
know
said
thy car.
know thy car.
Like you know thyself. But I love this idea of mutual disclosure. See, my car wasn't offering me any disclosure, so how was I supposed to know? You gotta talk to me.
Probably there was a manual somewhere. You just had to look for it.
The creator of my car disclosed the manual. I just didn't have it at hand. So
knowing by loving.
Accelerating disclosure, I think is mutual accelerating disclosure is what he says. In coupled fashion.
Sounds like John.
Yeah.
I haven't written it down, but it sounds like John.
Well, this is nice. Reciprocal, enhanced, mutual, conforming engenders love. Knowing is loving.
Knowing by loving.
Knowing by loving. I have that written down that way too, but I've read it wrong. Knowing
is
by
knowing.
loving. Yeah. Huh. So what I really wanted to get into, because we're about to move into the gluing part, unless you had something before that.
No, I'm also, the next sentence is the self-access glue.
And so what I was kind of hypothesizing, I guess, is women and our kind of communal way. In fact, like syncing up on cycles, our periods will sync up when we're around each other for a long time. There's just this way in which women can intimately know one another, where we are kind of like the glue, I think, of humans. And this kind of way of intuitive messages sensing into our bodies and having to be very intimately in relationship with our bodies really makes it to where this is something. Knowing of self is to act like glue. So yeah, like of humankind, I think that this is something that the feminine serves a role as, is the glue holding us all together. And the reason I get to that is because of what the quote that I came to, which is that it is to the benefit of women that men act in a way that is informed by philosophy instead of their instincts. And if in some cases that means that, because we struggle with this is something that is often said in our corner of the internet, that our role in this whole thing of philosophy is that women are attractive. So we can be nice little, like, I mean, so that we're like what's bringing the men in, like, okay, well, if there's no other reason, this is a chick magnet, and so that like leaves us like, okay, great, thanks. And so like, but if you think about it from this empowered position of, I'd rather men form a society around the love of wisdom than the love of getting their dick sucked or whatever, and if through that channel, that's how we get to that brain connection, then consider me a handmaiden that's bringing them to the temple, right? Because that's a mythology too.
Yeah, that's well said. But I think the important part to note, because I recently was thinking of roles we play, and I was thinking, I'm a handmaiden to Sophia. And this is then important to note. We're not handmaidens of the men.
Right.
We're handmaidens of Sophia.
Yeah.
But it's the duty of the handmaiden to take others by the hand and lead them to Sophia.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the other things that you mentioned that I think is really important is that no woman should be singled out as bait herself. And this is the role that we play in community. The glue as women is we're not going to leave one of our own out to just be viciously torn apart by the men.
Yeah.
That's not the point. The point is
No.
together will bring us to a better functioning society that's based on a pursuit of ourself, who we are as humans, and not what can we take, what can we have for our own selfish desires.
The woman as glue is very powerful, because the self acts as glue, he says, but then woman as the self of humanity is also a very cool idea.
Yeah.
And especially then, if woman, we're incredibly blessed, I think, of being part of this amazing group of women that we are a part of. And if you're in that blessed state, then it's so easy. Like he said, you have to turn the machinery of integration onto the world.
Yeah.
So it's turning it from us, because yes, we spend time gluing together after we spend years gluing ourselves, and then gluing together, and then onto the world.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, we kept referencing the scene from The Lord of the Rings for this ritual and this gathering that we had, in that scene of the, Frodo announcing that he'll carry the ring because everybody else is fighting over who's going to carry the friggin' ring, and he's like, I'll just do it. Plus he's also so attracted, interestingly enough, to the ring too. And then Gandalf's like, because he's like, but I'll need someone to show me the way, and Gandalf says, I'll guide you, my boy. And then the king steps up and is like, you have my sword. And Legolas is like, you have my bow. Yes. And the dwarf is like, you have my axe. And that's what it feels like, is for the benefit of us all. Let's go fucking destroy this ring. On we march. So that's what this whole thing kind of feels like, is like, be gone with this perspective that we have on humankind, that we're pillagers, that we, steal from the world, whatever it is, all the, we're not going to get rid of negative or shadow qualities that we have, but we don't have to have that as the perspective. That's what we are. So I think becoming a community, starting from a resolved self to the extent that you can form good bonds with high frequency people, and then that emanates out from the collective that's able to take up for the senses that maybe the other one doesn't have, or whatever.
It's because we are in a crisis.
Yeah.
And some of us have lost our goggles, and some of us have lost our weights, and some of us have lost our I'm imagining floating. I think too visually. And some of us have lost our tanks. And we need to do this together. There's no other way.
Yeah. Right. Because we either stay here in this part of the cave that's all well illuminated, but there's only a little bit of stuff here. Definitely not enough for all of us to survive, because we've forgotten everything beyond that. We're just like, well, this is our bubble. This is where we have to stay. And it's like, no, we can get outside the bubble, go exploring. But we're going to need each other, because one of us going out on our own, when the scout never comes back, what good is that for the, pushing the genes into the future? Because that's the whole point. Like, we have to understand that we're a collection of cells that holds itself together like glue. And each of these cells is functioning in this way that this thing stays together and does what it needs to do in order for the genes to continue into the future. So ultimately, that's always what it comes down to is, the selfish gene, or maybe the humanitarian gene. Or
I have changed. I've changed my. Because it's I do think that what you believe, that's why the next episodes freak me out. But we'll get to that. What you believe is very formative of your life.
Yeah.
So that whole thing that you can speak reality into being, I do think there's truth in that. But the only thing that I've allowed myself for quite some time to speak into being is the best possible future. But I've changed that recently to whatever future will bring about the best possible human being. So that is, for me, that's the gene I want to see to carry on.
Yeah. I like that. Because we can be selective and we can influence much more than just our own. So yeah, we can curate it a bit, not to the extent of something like eugenics, but the idea of, just being able to have influence over what the virtues arise as,
choosing the light over the darkness, choosing love over hate, choosing life over death.
Yeah. That's so interesting you say that. And I looked at the clock at 1:11, time left, but I had this kind of idea about the way that I was living my life before. And I wrote down, instead of slowly dying by taking uncalculated risk, we find something worth dying for and defend it or pursue it at all cost. And it made me think about like Steve Irwin, for example, who died doing exactly what he loved doing. He wouldn't have died any other way than preserving wildlife and spreading information about wildlife. So we're dying. That's what's happening. After you're born, you're dying. In what way do you want to die? Because like for a while, for me, it was uncalculated risk. Like, let me put myself in dangerous situations so I can feel something real. And it's now evolved into figuring out what it is that's worth dying for and sticking to that.
Wow.
So the glue.
But that's really beautiful, Sarah, that reframing of dying. That's beautiful. And I don't know how, but I think you may be able to find a way, because the cave analogy pops up for that as well. It's like just going into the cave for the sake of risking. Like, what is the word you used? Uncalculated risk.
Uncalculated risk, for the purpose of just uncalculated risk. Yeah.
Just to feel alive.
Yep.
Or actually, there's the story of, a while back, a few kids were trapped in a cave, and there were lots of cave divers that went in and out to rescue them.
Yes. Oh, well, this story is like huge in the scientific. Oh my gosh, the scuba community. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were in, I think, Thailand, if I'm not mistaken, and they were a soccer team. The coach was there with them, and they spent, I want to say, at least a night or two without knowing if they were going to be found. When they finally did find them, they had the monsoon or whatever tsunami had come through. There was no way to get them out because the water was blocking them. The only thing was they could keep bringing them food for the whole duration of the wet season, or they had to get them out through scuba in some sort of way. None of these kids certified in scuba, so they had to, like, spoiler alert, I think they had to put the kids under, give them anesthesia, and put on masks and just get them out while they were sleeping or unconscious. Interesting.
I hope that's not an analogy of what we need to do. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to knock you over the head to take you to a higher consciousness.
That's going to work into the analogy somewhere, but it was beautiful. The community came together. I mean, all the mothers, fathers, they're out there waiting, cooking food for the rescuers. There's a rescue team that's going in for them. This really is a great analogy for, like what an intervention might have to look like in the case of somebody that's just seems beyond help. It's like, no, there's just like a very technical and procedural thing that needs to happen here. Somebody in the military needs to come in and really put in some effort into some kind of tactical way to get them out.
It takes a village to raise a child, they say, but it also takes a village to save the world soul. So
glue.
We're only with 5 now. Well, we had the men support us as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's already spreading out. veining out into community. Mycelium kept coming up for me too, this idea of like I mean, because he gets into psilocybin later, and so just like the mycelial idea of us spreading out in that way as mycelium does, and sending messages between trees and all these kinds of interesting things. Like you can plug in some sort of probe nodes into fungus, and it'll make sounds. Of course, they're measuring different waves that are pumping through the mushroom, and it's going to translate to sound waves, whatever waves it is creating, whatever vibrations it's creating. But still, something really interesting about it, them communicating. Also, psilocybin, Paul Stamets says, will start to form fruiting bodies in places where humans have walked, kind of like they're following us. Which is, I think, is adorable. So anyway, that's what little women do. Or little mushrooms following them. Those that follow the little white rabbit.
We are the little white rabbit.
Yes, I agree. Now he does talk about the self as a powerful set of functions for integrating, complexifying processing. So powerful set of functions for complexifying processing. And the reason you want to complexify it is to insert that disruption and allow a varied variables in, so that you can have that disruption. A broom just fell.
Did you just have a disruption?
Yes. I swear.
Yeah, I think, are you now where he speaks about the machines that make sense of the world?
Because he gets there through this proposal that the ability to make sense of the world by gluing it together as you're gluing yourself together. So yes, the powerful machinery of complexification.
These are books that's not, but I do desperately want to mention them. So it is related to John because he has a Rich Blundell. I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, the surname part. And it's called Giving Nature a Seat at the Table. And because you also, the nature part popped out of, so I was like, I know, I have to mention this. We're not going to get through everything, but that's fine.
Yeah.
People can just go watch the episode.
Yeah. This one's kind of ineffable.
So he spoke about the big history. And this is the guy, I think, who invented the name of big history, David Christian. I had the honor of meeting him as well. That's my thing. I meet people.
Yes, you do. I know.
And he was older, so he had difficulty hearing. But he does this book. He speaks. What popped out for me is the concept of entropy, which is this disruption, and how important it is to probably, we don't know, but probably to the creation of life. And the same, because David Christian himself told me, he wrote this book at the same time that Dan Brown wrote the book Origin, because he actually wanted to call his book just Origin, but then Dan Brown just wrote a book called Origin, so he couldn't. His publishers advised against it strongly. So that's why it's Origin Story. But in the book Origin of Dan Brown, he actually also speaks about entropy a lot. So it's like this disruptive strategies is also actually quite fundamental to the concept of life itself. And then what I also want to mention, because this book was, because she's part of the community, I found out by a comment, this book was recommended by John, Ursula Goodenough. Amazing book. And I think the ideal towards which I am striving is, and I think it's John's thing as well, if I pick up correctly, this combined with Neoplatonism, like bringing Neoplatonism back to earth type of thing. Because Neoplatonism is a two-world mythology. religion. It's a philosophy, religion, very much a religion. The more I read about it, the more it becomes a religion in my mind.
Yeah.
So,
nice.
Yeah. So I do want to mention these books because I think they're important for the way forward.
Yeah. And was that on the ability to make sense of the world by gluing it together as yourself, gluing yourself together, or as you're gluing yourself together?
Yeah. No, this was he talked about how the people who work with artificial intelligence are trying to make machines that can make sense of the world. We don't program them. We teach them how to study and learn by themselves, and how they get those machines to do it, which is apparently also what we do then, is to use disruptive strategies. And then he just once mentioned the idea of entropy, that they throw in noise entropy, and that helps. That helps with making sense of the world.
That's so interesting. And because right before he gets into that whole thing about the AI, he says, therefore, there's a radical sense of the being mode of remembering who and what we are. So with AI, they're building it from the different vantage point now. It's no longer this like exploratory, who am I, what am I? It's like, how do we make a mind? And so it's like people attempting to make machines that make sense of the world. That's what he says that the machines
and we can't even do it ourselves.
Yeah, let's just instruct a robot, which I don't know if it was in here where the word robot is actually like likened to slave. Like, yeah, like robota.
I don't think you mentioned in this one.
No, okay, so this is something that I read from
I think it's a Polish word, right?
Now I need to just
check I had a male friend, let's call him just a male friend, who told me it was a Polish word, robot.
Yeah, it is a Polish word.
Meant slave.
Any arduous work, drudgery, grind, slog.
Yeah.
So it's like, so since we couldn't figure it out, here you do the dirty work, robots.
Making sense of the world. Aww.
And so us becoming robots, oh my gosh. Okay, so existential crisis.
Another one.
Yes, another one. They just come on like that now. So he mentions
okay, you've got a community now.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's nice. That's why I can get reoriented so quickly. It's like, hold your tether. Woodward et al., because John just has to give out references for everything he mentions. So sometimes I don't even write down. When he gives me a whole list of references, I'm like, all right, I'm skipping that. But randomization. I never write it down. You what? No, never.
I never write it down. That's why when you refer to names, I'm like, I don't know. What's the theory? Give me the theory. Right. I know the theories. I don't know the names.
Yeah. This randomization into neural networks. So training the AI to learn for itself. They have to throw the randomization into the neural networks and introduce randomness. It's essential for there to be a disruption. That's so interesting. That they get so stuck on their patterns. They're like, nope, when I do this, this happens. Therefore, if then, but actually that doesn't always apply to everything. And that the way that you see that is when it doesn't work. And so, some randomization of that pattern is like, oh, actually it doesn't fit here. And that's how it has to learn. So interesting. Statistics, which I actually did very poorly in.
I've never liked statistics.
I didn't like it either.
I always feel like I'm the odd one out. So what does it help me to study statistics?
Yeah, right. I'm not average, so. But the whole point of statistics, he says, and I'm summarizing here, but patterns of experience are the same as the experience of the world. And so in order to get that result, the sample population has to be comparable in ratio maybe to the whole sample or collective from which you pull that.
He uses the example, you can't just ask students if students shouldn't pay tuition fee, because of course students are going to say that.
Yeah.
but ask someone who has to pay taxes so that students don't have to, and then maybe they'll have a different opinion.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, man, this is so interesting, because he gets into this part of statistics, the line of best fit being data compression, and it brought me back to this idea of how ideologies are just a compression, or which flag are you, red or blue? Easy. Yeah, I'm gonna take that. It's all set up for me, nice and designed with marketing strategies included, and I'm off with this because I can spread this even if I don't fully understand it. It's the line of best fit. My political ideology is the line of best fit. It's the lesser of two evils.
Disruptive strategies set within powerful pattern detection.
Yeah, I have that written down too. That's what is at work in those higher states of consciousness.
Yes. And that's why you have to come in with this ability to a general skill for getting an optimal grip on the world. That's your powerful pattern detection. And then you throw a bunch of disruptive strategies at yourself, and boom.
Yeah, I have that. He says that's states of consciousness. It's also why belonging to a tradition that can afford powerful pattern detection and introduce disruption and then guide you to help toggle to find the sweet spot. I really like this idea of toggling, because that's when we hit those rug pull moments, like, whoops, too far that direction. That's what that feels like. It's like when you're centering and you go right and left and you go a little less each time until you find the center. It's like that sweet spot. Yeah, he says jamming without skills gives you junk, not jazz. There's a certain understanding of music that you have to have in order to jam. You can't, it's not like, I know how to play an A and then you can jam with people, like
It could
that's
work.
my work. I'm done here. Let me just take my bow. Yeah. So like there's a intimate level, there's an understanding, there's an intimate relationship that one has with music in order for them to be able to jam with other people that also understand music in that intimate way. Astrology, if I want to talk to people about astrology, they have to have a certain level of understanding, or else I need to meet somebody else in a different frame of maybe not astrology, but maybe seasons, and then we can start there. What a day is like. So yeah, the machines are doing compression.
Knowing by loving came up when you talked about you need to have an intimate knowledge of music to be able.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And why it's so, just continues to be why it's so important to have community around what it is that you do
value
and love. Yeah.
I do find, because I think whatever we have here, the five of us, is really important and special, but we're so different.
Yeah.
And our traditions are so different, and our skills and expertise are so different. So that's also kind of weird, but awesome.
Yeah.
But it's
the similarities in the astrology was just like, but you can see how it arises differently. Everybody has a different incarnation cross between us. Even Rebecca and I, who have a lot in common now that I've seen her actual chart. But yeah, it manifests in a completely different way between the two of us. Even that similarity, even something that's so similar, the mystic and the scientist coming together. Yeah, that's definitely part of why it feels so important too, because we each have a different role to play.
Yeah.
It's community and not competition, which is what we're so used to. It's competing for resources instead of communing around them, recognizing the abundance nature at the table. Yeah.
But what is the isolated individual to do other than compete?
Right. Yeah. When you think that that's what life's about, is like, what can I
Yeah.
get before I die? I only have
Yeah.
so much time. I only have so much
Yeah.
food. I only have so much money. And
Yeah.
then you just start reacting from that space of,
Yeah.
this is who I am. This is perpetuating, and never get to really settle into everything's here for me. Everything that I need is here for me now. Because other people will help me provide, because I can help them in some special, unique way too, just by being myself.
Like John said, Sartre said, hell is other people, but so is heaven.
Yeah.
And there was Jonathan Peugeot mentioned that in his talk at Thunder Bay. Heaven is other people. And he actually thinks hell is not other people. It's a miscommunication or misreflecting other, something like that. I can't really remember. Is hell, not the people themselves.
Okay.
Other
The
people are always
response.
heaven.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
like we talked about before, if you're not truly yourself, if you're not authentic, you're also not reflecting others authentically.
Yeah.
And then they don't get to see who they really are.
Right.
And then they see you as a sort of hell.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's so true.
something like that. I don't
Yeah.
know. We need to relearn that heaven is other people.
Yes. So yeah, let's talk about then tracking the brains during experience. During these.
So that is actually talked about in the past. It's that book that I was completely raving about. The one that, but what I thought what might be interesting, because the guy who wrote the book uses an analogy which is really good. He says like, okay, what you have to do is you can climb up the stairs of a diving board and just dive into a pool, and then you have this kind of, because you need to go hyperactive your brain, and then hyper and then hypoactive, these two parts, and the thalamus is super enhanced the whole time. But what you really want to do, if you want to have this big enlightenment, you want to climb up a mountain and then not jump but kind of fall, because it has to be, it has to become from like out of nowhere, and fall not on the ground but fall into the ocean and just keep falling and falling and falling. And that is the bigger the difference between the hyperactivity that you have in your prefrontal cortex and your or prefrontal lobe and those lobes that I can't pronounce, rhinal lobes. The bigger the difference, the more impact it's going to be. That's why I think I'm talking to Lemon Pascal was like really quite an impact on me, because I was like hyperactive, very much like tuned. My frontal cortex was, because he's a very smart man, and he was throwing all these terms at me like, I really have to focus now and switch on, and then he said something that just threw me off that cliff. And that's why it was like, whoa. Yeah. I really felt that fall. I felt this going from hyperactive to hypoactive. And it's cool because you don't always feel it, but I very much felt it then.
Yeah. Interesting. I kind of feel like maybe that's kind of what I experienced through this whole process of the pilgrimage. And like it's starting off at a certain level and then going really, really, really high. And then that whole trip back by myself and then getting back into routine, regular life, it's just like, whoa. And for a couple of days, I mean, I also started my period, so that had something to do with it. But for a couple of days, I've been kind of like laid out and feeling a weird sense of overwhelm and hopelessness at the same time. But it's just, it's a sharp drop off. And so that's been something, a process for it too. It's to process the whole experience, but recognizing that that's actually really overwhelming to even try to encapsulate into a thought, Yeah.
Because ritual does demand hyperactive, mostly, like because you have to, the book talks about the slower the movements are and the more structured. And I mean, the rituals we participated in was very structured, most of them. Yeah. So it does demand a high level of activity in these lobes that matters. And we were super conscious of ourselves as well, because we all had a role to play, and we had to, okay, after that one, then it's my turn. Like for me, that was the most difficult. Knowing when it's my turn.
There's actually rules here, constraints within which we can be creative. Yeah.
But it takes super activation of the prefrontal cortex and of the these lobes,
those side lobes, we'll call them. Okay. And so but you also said while enhanced activity of the thalamus integrates it all, so that big hump and then crash, all the while thalamus is like, I feel like he's a god. Thalamus is back there, like, and it starts with a P, doesn't it? Thalamus.
I have a TH, which is thalamus. That's how I wrote it. I'm not sure.
Integrates
but I think it's
all that hyperactivity and then hypoactivity, which he calls the parietal, the frontal and parietal, he's saying is our general intelligence. So that's like the whole point, is it's trying to integrate, it's trying to like make sense of it all.
Yeah, I think the general intelligence is this domain general skill in getting an optimal grip on the world. I think they're related. I think so. I haven't heard John ever say that, but it feels right to me.
Yeah. Well, he also mentions this term metastability, which is the state of the brain complexifying. So while it's integrating and segregating, this is metastability.
Yeah. And I think that's the thalamus's job, right?
Yeah.
I'm not
metastable.
Sure. Yeah.
Your job.
I will. I'm glad I don't have that job.
I know, right? I'd rather be a robot.
We'll give that to a man.
Complexification gives you emergent functions and new abilities. You can do things as a human that you can't do as a zygote, precisely because you are complex.
That's also such a quote, right? You can do things as a human that you can't do as a zygote. Whoa, I didn't know that.
Look what I can do. It says, because I'm differentiated, I can do many different things, but because I'm highly integrated, I don't fall apart as a system. I like that. In biology, we all have this experience with this slime mold that you grow, and you grow different cells of the slime mold, and then it culminates together, and then it makes this like, fruiting body, just like the mycelium. I mean, this is exactly the same thing, but it reminds me of that, how they culminate together and then they form this one solid thing that makes another thing.
Oh, I just looked directly into the sun.
Well, good.
Don't do this at home, kids.
Trying to get intimate.
Knowing by loving.
Yeah. Yesterday, actually, the sun was so blocked by clouds, but not to the extent, like I could still see the sun and I could look directly at it because the clouds provided the fog enough that it was like a white orb. So cool.
Yeah. I was once driving with someone and we were like, is that the moon or is that the sun? Because it was so blocked with clouds that you couldn't actually see if it's the moon or the sun.
That was kind of similar. And it's so interesting because we just had a full moon, so it could have definitely been. I can definitely attest to this whole idea of psilocybin providing you that ability to see the whole world in a grain of sand. Because I mean, even people that haven't actually tried them have seen movies like Fear and Loathing, for instance, where there's just this kaleidoscopic element to your vision. Things start to move when they shouldn't be moving and things like that. So like literally looking at the ground, you can start seeing things shift, and it's just this, for whatever reason, it causes this kaleidoscopic effect in your vision and makes it to where things look like they're moving when they're not. They're just always creeping or breathing or whatever it is. So that takes a lot for your brain to make sense of that, I think. I'm
wearing some of your thyme around my neck. I put some thyme in the bottle.
Put some time in the bottle. That's so nice. I have on my anklet, my moon anklet.
I've got my anklet on as well.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, he goes here into more emphasis on why it has to be with the proper context of the tradition, the institution, or some sort of community for cultivating of wisdom, which is nice because what I've seen with this whole movement towards getting psychedelics legalized or starting to use psychedelics in the psychological community is the emphasis on setting, and a sitter. And those being like, that's how you heal people, not put them on a pharmaceutical that they have to take for the rest of their life, but give them a moment of complete release with somebody there to guide them through it. And they're, gonna pick really real things to focus on.
The importance of community. Having someone in the cave with you.
Somebody trustworthy in the cave with you. Because this is all this topic of plausibility that he's going into, and plausible he describes here as stands to reason, makes good sense, could be taken seriously, because the whole question here is, why should we listen to people that have been in this state? Why should this state serve as a justification for transformation of your life? Because it's plausible.
Yeah, and then he goes into the convergence and elegance on the different sides and fluency in the middle. And then he explains that in detail, but I don't think we have time to also explain it in detail. So watch the episode, people. And then he says, like, you have that in this altered stage of consciousness, because you have the convergence in that it is de-automization, it is decentering, and there's fluency in processing. So that is on the side of the convergence, and on the side of the elegance, you have the nexus for development, you have complexification, you have exaptation of your machinery. And it all happens within a flowing optimal grip. So he goes into great detail in that, and it's profound. He says it's profoundly plausible, because he says if something is high in convergence and high in elegance and high in fluency, we experience it as profound, which is beautiful. And if it's only high in convergence but not very elegant, it's triviality. And if it's high in elegance or power but not in convergence, it's like conspiracy theory is far-fetched. So you want both. And he says these gives you both. That's why it's highly plausible, profoundly plausible. But no certainty, because there is no such thing as certainty.
Yeah, I love how he's like, you have to rely on plausibility. I wrote here, he says in a haggard sigh while erasing away another wisdom mandala. You have to rely on plausibility because science will give me certainty. Well, first of all, let's pay attention to the history of science. That's what he starts with. Like, yeah, actually, no, we've never had certainty. We just continue to prove wrong the existing science, which is the point of science. As much as we hate for that to be the case, because people don't necessarily like change as much as they don't think they like change as much as they actually do, maybe. But there's this desire for certainty when actually the only thing that we know to always be true is change. And with science, the whole point is to change it. It's for it to be adaptable, for it to be malleable, for it to stand up to time, because Isis told us so many times that things that are rigid aren't actually going to stand up to something like an earthquake. They have to be flexible and movable and malleable. And so science gives us self-correcting plausibility.
Yes.
That's nice.
Then he starts talking about the propositions people come up with after, and then he says it's so bizarre, and I'm like, yeah, well, I wrote down, well, reality is bizarre.
Yes, it's actually a bizarre landscape.
That's me.
Salient, bizarre landscape. Yeah. I have, however, propositions from higher states are useless.
Yeah.
How to cultivate wisdom and see through self-deception. Yeah.
Not secret metaphysical knowledge, but wise practices. Although I do think a lot of the ancient mystery cults were all about secret metaphysical knowledge.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Maybe it was about wise practices.
I mean, it's about participatory transformation. It's not about propositional knowing. So there's a difference there between what your goal is. And with the wisdom communities, it seemed community was the goal as opposed to making propositions and being the one that was, you know, in some cases they were. But I don't think everybody that was doing this, Socrates, Plato, I don't think they're trying to create legacy, Aristotle, even though that was kind of the result. They're just like exploring self further. And of course, it doesn't stop with just those wisdom teachers or instructors, but just for the example of these figureheads don't really come about it with that as their intention. Their intention seems to be more of understanding the self for the purpose of
and developing the self, anagage, self-transcendence.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. It's good that you made that connection. Very, very well spotted there.
Yeah. Because he says, do not confuse the rationality of wisdom with that of knowledge.
Yes. So I have a quote.
Yeah.
From Ursula Goodenough. It's a short one.
Nice.
She quotes Mary Oliver first, and then she writes herself. Blessed be the tie that binds us. It anchors us. We are embedded in the great evolutionary story of planet Earth. The spare, elegant process of mutation and selection and bricolage. I don't know. And this means that we are anything but alone. Blessed be the tie that binds.
The glue.
The glue. Yeah. And I have to think of the rope that John is providing us as well. Yeah. It anchors us.
Yeah. As we move into the higher states and back.
Deep into the cave.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that one's hard to just cover up in an hour and a half. So I think we did. I think we made good progress into this tunnel of the cave. I think we can safely come back out and encapsulate what the Buddha has in that tunnel next time.
Maybe okay, people don't know this, but maybe we exemplified more than talked about these things. And so it's not about the knowledge, it's about the practices.
Yeah. No propositions, but the participation definitely opens some different caves that we can go and explore in.
Yeah. And that's, we're so different. We came to our gathering with such different propositions, but we participate together. And it was something beautiful was born.
Yeah, already.
It still needs some mothering and tender loving care, and
we'll rear it. It needs the nurture. Okay, well, yeah, that's this one. So now we're through higher states of consciousness, and this is going to relate back, I guess, in the next episode with the axial age and kind of getting a culminating message around that.
Yeah, I think the next one is about the Buddha and Buddhism, and I usually we'll talk about it next time. My pre-existing aversion to Buddhism. But the way John explains it is really like I told Layman, if someone explained Buddhism to me initially, like John explains it, then I wouldn't have had this aversion.
Yeah.
So he really explains it beautifully.
From a good perspective. Okay, cool. Well, catch us at After Socrates, Sundays, noon Toronto time.
The Stoa After Socrates.
The Stoa After Socrates. Oh my gosh. Well, see, the Stoa didn't open.
We'll try to open the doors this week.
I got confused. But yes, we'll be there, and we hope to see you then. And thank you for joining us.